Well, obviously you know who they are, but let's just make it official. We have Dan Levy, Emily Hampshire, Annie Murphy, and Eugene Levy. Now, before we get into season 4, which we will do, I want to go back to the season 3 finale, which had 2 of the sweetest scenes I think we've ever seen on the show.
Was I in one?
Just, take a rest for a minute, Eugene. We'll come to you. But no, listen, I was joking. My goodness, legend, please. But a round of applause for the people who cheered or teared up whenever David and Patrick had their first kiss. So take us through the formation of that relationship and how you wanted to build that into the show.
Well, it got to a point where we were like, I guess David should win something. And that was really where it came from. We thought, let's throw him a bone and let's, give him someone who actually likes him for who he is and not like his previous relationships, which were sort of like a crash course in like people you shouldn't date. And so we had intended from the very beginning that this person who sort of entered his life in a business capacity would slowly develop feelings. And, I think the tricky thing was balancing how that played out and tried to, you try and tell a story in a really authentic way. And I think you're dealing with a relationship that's not, you don't see a lot of them on TV. So when you're given the opportunity, you try to service it as best you can. And yeah, it didn't help that Noah's just so great and makes it very easy. But that was really what it came down to. In that last scene in the car, I was rewriting it, and at first he was going to kiss me, and then I thought, well, that's not something that I think would actually happen, because he was, so we thought, well, what if we made it so that he was so confident and he was giving David all of these clues all season long, and then when it came down to the time to actually act on the kind of confidence that he'd shown throughout the season, he just couldn't do it, and it was up to David to sort of carry it across the finish line, and that's ultimately where the the thank you speech came in, and it happened about 2 hours before we shot. I finally finished it and gave it to Noah, and I said, I think this is it. I know I've given you 42 other drafts, but I think this is it. And then when we shot it, it was very clear that it sort of felt like anyway, that's how we're
I think one of the things that's so refreshing also about the relationship is so often on comedies, the laughs come from whenever the people in the person's life don't like the new love interest. But on this show, I just loved how Stevie and Alexis, they both literally gave him the thumbs up throughout the season. So we knew that they liked him. We knew that he was good.
I think they prefer him to David, ultimately. He's like a far more stable person and reliable and bankable and less moody and, yeah. But it was interesting because you cast a character like that and you're thinking, who is this person that would balance David's insanity? And it had to have been someone who was just like a quiet, confident person who could sort of find him charming.
Wearing a nice button down.
Wearing a lovely button down and some very tight denim.
And going to Annie.
They were very tight jeans all the time. And I constantly had to ask him, like, are you comfortable in those? He was like, I guess. They were on a rack. I put them on.
Well, I want to do another round of applause question. How many of you teared up whenever Moira showed up at the graduation? And obviously, that scene is great for the song, for her costume, but also the look on your face, Annie, also made that moment. Tell us about what you remember about filming that sequence.
So that scene, we shot Catherine's coverage first, and I cried every single time, because not only is it a beautiful scene of Moira coming through as a mom, but it's Catherine O'Hara fucking singing to you and looking at you with this love. So I cried out literally every single tear I had in my body, because I was like, oh, this might be nice for my coverage. But no, they were all gone by that time. So, but the look on my face in that was a lot Annie Murphy.
Where did the tears go?
they were gone. They were gone. They had been shed. But yeah, it was like a really wonderful. That was one of my big, like holy shit moments of my career. That scene.
Yeah, Annie's had a few of those moments in the show. Just lovely, lovely moments. The scene in the car when David is telling you that, you know, he's the one that was worried about you when you were traveling around the world on your little escapades with these guys, and it wasn't Johnny, it wasn't Mom, it wasn't Dad, it was me. I was the one who was sending you colored contact lenses to different embassies around the world to help you out of jams. And she says, well, you didn't have to worry about me. He says, well, I did. And then Annie has this beautiful little smile out the window of knowing that her brother actually, you know, cares about her. It was a lovely, lovely little moment. Yeah.
And I think, yes, we can applaud for that. I think one of the things that's so special about the show is the ability to do that, where you have these tender moments that are surprising, and then because the characters are so innately self-absorbed, it resets, you know, and then you have a chance to, I know, shockingly.
I'm not denying it.
But then what's great is that then it gives you the chance to build to that moment again, and we get to feel it all over, and it's so effective. So maybe this is a question for you with the writer's room and Eugene as producer. How do you pace those kind of moments where you can show that tenderness and give actresses and yourselves those great moments to play?
Well, I think they come out quite naturally in the storytelling. I mean, the tone of the show, the nature of the show is as what we had set it out to be in the very beginning was a character comedy, and you place great emphasis on the character. The characters have to be believable. The characters have to be real. The stories have to be grounded, and if you can set that up and do it as well as you can, then there's a very good chance the audience are going to buy the characters. The audience are going to be emotionally involved with the characters, and you can then take the audience on a lovely ride through some great laughs and also some great emotional moments as well, and they're going to hang with you with that because they care enough about the characters, and that's...
I'm also sort of, you know, I really feel like in TV you have to earn those moments. So for us, it was really about laying the groundwork to get to those moments and not just handing it out like candy. You know, if you're going to do a will they, won't they, make it count, you know, because at the end of the day, you're not just dicking an audience around. You have to rope them in and make them care. So for us, any time that we tell those moments, there's like tentpole moments throughout the show where we know that something more emotional is going to happen. And as a writer's room, for us, it's really about building the momentum of that so that when the emotional moments happen, the audience feels like they've earned it, as opposed to just sort of peppering them as we will. So it's very specific, and we know exactly where they're going, and then we build to them, and you know, hopefully that's what makes them special. But also setting up a scenario where a family's like never told each other that they love each other. I mean, if you really think about the show, the moments that you're talking about, these like emotional moments, are just family members being like, I care for you. And people are like, oh my God. So the dysfunction of this family somehow like builds to the emotional moments, because we're not doing anything really emotional. We're just sharing our feelings, which shouldn't be as weepy as it is, and yet here we are.
Here we are. Well, there was one more exciting thing we need to talk about in the season 3 finale. The motel sold out for the first time, which deserves its own round of applause. I don't know how that happened. But for Emily, obviously, we're used to in the earlier seasons seeing, you know, you and Dan have scenes together. And now there's this partnership with Johnny and with Eugene. So what has that transition sort of been like, and evolution of your character?
Yeah, I mean, I think Stevie at the beginning of the series would choose the path of least resistance and to do the least amount of work possible. And it's interesting because when you see what we just saw, the season 4 opening, would Stevie of season 1 care about a dead guy in room 4. But like suddenly she's going to Johnny, and I feel like there's been this huge change in her in opening up, but kind of like you were saying, and like with the Rose family, that like when you're starved so much of emotion, just like I care about you is so meaningful. And so to me, the relationship with Johnny and Stevie breaks my heart because it feels like I always wondered, who's Stevie's family? Like where does Stevie come from? And to just see how starved she is for kind of like, I don't know, a father kind of caring figure. That always breaks my heart a bit.
And Eugene, what are you enjoying about that relationship on the show? A new dynamic.
I've been getting more airtime.
Working with me, basically.
No, that's not true. No, it is great. Well, because over the seasons, I mean, everything is kind of evolving. The family is kind of evolving individually. People are evolving, and the relationship with Stevie and the family has been evolving. The idea that Stevie inherited this motel and doesn't know what to do with it and is freaking out, because she doesn't really want to look after the whole motel. That was not in her game plan at all. Way too much responsibility. And when Johnny steps in and said, listen, we can partner up here, and, I can, help you out here because I would let you don't have to do it, Stevie says, but I want to do it. I think that would be something I would want to do. That's a lovely moment, and it's the beginning of a great partnership here that got to the second stage where Stevie's saying, if the motel gets too successful, what's going to happen is you're, probably going to,
They haven't seen that yet.
What's that?
Oh.
We're mixing up our seasons. But that's fine.
Son,
What other questions do we
Spoiler
have
alert.
going
I want to
on?
let him talk. Let him talk.
son, it's called a tease.
Yes.
And I think I've hooked a lot of people now with that storyline.
Let's just tell them how it ends.
It involves an 18-wheeler, and it is not pretty.
No, one thing we have seen teased in season 4, so it's safe to talk about, is that Alexis is going to enroll in college. And I have seen the first 6 episodes, and I feel like of the new season, and it is a really empowering and interesting season for Alexis. How are you feeling about her as we begin the new year?
I've been so grateful to the writers this season for kind of taking Alexis on this awesome arc, because she's no longer this woman that's defined by her man or her money, and she now has her high school diploma and it can take over the world. And it's also really interesting to see her dealing with a heartbreak for the first time, I think ever. I think she's been caught up in a lot of lustful relationships and superficial relationships, but to see her actually dealing with a very, very regular human situation at the age of 30 is really interesting. And then also being in the situation of wanting something that she can't have for maybe the first time as well. So it was a lot of fun playing a sad Alexis, because usually she's able to find the silver lining in things and make the most of the situation, as she does this season. In season 4, she, chooses a path of self-betterment, but also fighting this awful feeling of having a heart that's smashed to pieces. So yeah, I had a really good time this season playing that, up and down.
And going to David, we've obviously know that the store is still new, so there'll be some things there.
Yeah, but growing. Yeah.
And the relationship, according to the promo, makes it at least 4 months, which is something to celebrate.
Yes.
But so I guess will we see Well, we see ups and downs, and also, they're in a small town, which obviously has been known for big hearts, but maybe not as open minds as one may think. So, what can you sort of tease about what we'll see with that relationship?
Well, I will say this: the town of Schitt's Creek will never judge anybody, and that's just a standard we're setting because I won't have it any other way. So that is that. But in terms of the relationship, listen, David has never had any kind of semblance of functional relationship at all. And Patrick is sort of freshly out of the closet. So for us, it was really interesting to tell, in a way, parallel stories of two people who are going into something together. For David, I think it's just realizing that he can trust people, like, generally speaking. And for Patrick, it was, what are these feelings that I've had? I've now sort of, things are cracking open, and what does that look like? And what are the, what is that sort of first couple steps into this whole new world for him look like? And it's an interesting dance, because David is not the most capable person when it comes to, like, juggling emotional weight and responding in a rational manner, but Patrick is. So they work it out, but it's not without some ups and downs. But there's some really fun. We got to do some really fun stuff this season, and I'm just excited to tell the story and for it to continue to evolve.
And with the motel, we don't want to spoil too much about what happens when it becomes a little bit more successful. So let's go back to just what was the impetus to set the show at a motel and have a character like Stevie already built in there. We're seeing that the motel really has become a character, especially in this first episode, people being trapped in it with the dead body. So yeah, what was the idea to set it at a motel?
I think there was an element of, when we were sort of referencing shows that we were looking to, there was like an Andy Griffith show sort of world that we were exploring as well. And the idea of setting it at this quaint motel was always something that intrigued us just from a convention standpoint. And then the character of Stevie has always acted as the eyes of the audience. So she is the point of entry for the audience. She is the person who is going to say the things that the audience is probably saying to each other while watching it. And I think it's always important to have that one character on a show while you're watching it that you can trust. And then you can trust everyone else.
What is that tail on your sweater? Like, you need
exactly
to have that person. Because the audience is wondering, what the is that?
That is that was an archival horsehair helmet Lang.
Did we
that
settle
I
on
scoured
horsehair?
the internet for and finally found.
It was a debate on set for a long time. Like, what exactly is that?
It was horsehair. I'm not proud of it.
Like the mane or the tail?
Listen, I bought it used.
Okay.
But yes, that's what it is. And I've had seen it a long, long time ago. Originally wanted it for myself, and then thought, that's ridiculous. And then thought, David in an Amish farm, that's a good look. This all works.
You can get away with a lot of things you want for yourself through David.
Absolutely.
And when the cast was here in 2016, minus Emily, we heard Annie's casting story about what the day before you got the audition, you were in tears and almost giving up on acting. So I won't make you relive that, but yes. I will bring it up, though, just to set up that we'd love to hear Emily's casting
well,
story.
you're going to relive it through me. I was just telling Eugene about it today at lunch. So I was in LA and going through a divorce and giving up acting because, well, not giving up acting because I'd never had another job, but just didn't know what I would do because I suddenly started breaking out in hives when I went into auditions because I was very, I don't know, nervous or something. But then I got the audition for Schitt's Creek, and I told my agent I can't go into auditions. I can put myself on tape, but I cannot go into the room. And she's like, no, do this. It's Canadian. They're nice. And I went into an audition in LA. I have no recollection of it except for somebody I met recently. I think it was John Comerford came on set and told me I lifted up my shirt and put my head in it or something.
did.
Okay, I have no recollection of that.
I remember it fondly.
Was it scripted? I don't know how does that
Oh,
go?
no.
That-
it wasn't like hot. It was like hiding. It was like.
Oh God.
So
Like at what point did you do that?
listen, it was my first time casting anything, and it was me and a casting director, and having auditioned for things myself, I was perhaps a little too generous, not with Emily, but just generally speaking, because I knew what it was like to go into an audition room, and I would like, okay, someone would come in, it wouldn't be right, and I'm like, well, what if we try, you try your best to get the most out of. Emily came in, and immediately was like, I'm so sorry, this is gonna be terrible. Anyway, I'm so sorry. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, I guess.
I like to lower expectations. I feel like that's like.
At the end of the day,
for sure
I
win.
now realize it was a tactic. But she came in and did it, and it was great. And I remember saying, like, well, what if we just, like, there's a, I think the one note was like, why don't we just try it where she gets a little bit more of a kick out of these people? She's not just judging them, she's like enjoying them too.
Was Emily still in her shirt at this point?
The shirt comes in a sec. So she did it again, and it was, you can tell when it clicks. You can just tell. And it was great. And I remember saying, like, great, we're good. And then she was like, no, it was, oh God, it was terrible. It was so bad. And then pulls her shirt up over her head. And I'm sitting there, like, having never met her before, being like, is this an HR situation? Like, what do you...
This is how I got
How
work
do I
in
respond?
Canada. I slept my way straight to the middle of Canadians
So...
with my giant rack.
Yeah. And it... Wait, I'm gonna let you get that laugh. And then it happened, and then we brought her in to test, and actually Annie also tested for Stevie as well.
But you said you were going to be good at the beginning, so they expected even more, and I said I'm going to be
Yeah,
terrible.
Annie came in and was like,
walked in
I'm
and I
gonna
said,
fucking nail this.
I'm gonna fucking kill this.
And then she didn't get Stevie. But yeah, so we had Annie read for both Alexis and Stevie, and then Emily came in, and it was very clear that Annie
Blew
was
me out of the water.
Alexis, and that Emily was Stevie. And that's the end
was
of a
Stevie.
very long story.
It was a good story. We appreciate that. A few more questions from me, and then we will go to the audience questions. Last season, I think we saw Stevie's apartment, and it with the Sarah McLachlan poster. We know that David followed the little affair for a couple of years. It made me wonder, though, are there other things on the set that you've added for your characters, or that you wish that people at home would notice?
Oh, there's so much.
Stevie's Tamagotchi is one.
Which I always try to like do
Oh, no, it's
business
dead.
with. It's dead,
Yeah.
but I try to pretend acting-wise that it's alive still.
It's a weird choice. Stevie's are... Let's go with 30 and playing with a lovely Tamagotchi. Deranged side. There's going to be a spin-off of that show where the wool gets just pulled back on her private life. It's going to be great.
Is there anything in the motel rooms? We obviously know Moira's wigs are prominently displayed, but anything else that you've added?
In the cafe, actually, my favorite prop on the show is the menu. That is literally like. I wish everyone could see the inside of the menu because it's very detailed, and there's literally every dish you could possibly imagine. There's like literally 150 things you could order on this menu, and they're all described in great.
I wish
loving
everyone could see
detail.
the insides of everything. Like anything that is a pamphlet or something is so detailed of actual made-up Schitt's Creek things.
The menu is custom.
We wanted a big menu, and they would come in with a menu. They would come in with a menu and just say, well, what about this? And it's like, not big enough. Not big enough. And finally, it was a.
Let's get it this big, and then we can scale
Yeah.
it down, and that's sort of how we ended up with it. But it's a custom size. So
all of the books that people are reading, all of those book jackets are, the titles of the books. What are some of the books that you have?
it's like an anatomy of the aesthetic or something. It's like David's book titles are always the most fun to write because they're always sort of like, like navigating taste or something insane that no one should ever buy or support.
Yeah, we'd have those books are amazing because we were shooting a scene in the motel room, and kind of just sitting on the bed or something, having a discussion with Moira, and I'll look down and see this book, The White Stallion. And I would just start laughing in the middle of a take. Yeah, great props department there. They do a fantastic job.
They also have great like things for us on our phones. When we're scrolling through our phones, they've brought up like various Tinder pages that they've just like dreamt up off the tops of their
Wallpaper,
head.
like what does the wallpaper
Text
on Alexis's
messages.
phone look like? It's like a rainbow beach scene or something.
And Jake's number in my phone, I noticed, was just abs.
Right.
Fantastic. One Moira question, just on Catherine, of course.
Catherine
recognize her.
is very sick. Otherwise, she would absolutely be here. So she
okay.
sends her best to everyone.
Yeah, I
has
didn't
a
know whether
bad-
you knew that or
bad
not, or
flu.
whether it wasn't announced yet, right, Catherine?
They
Was
announced
she-
it, I think, before, right?
She's not
okay.
here.
Well, she was very sick.
I'm surprised she's not here. But we've seen in the promo that she is the subject of an internet death hoax, which is a brilliant idea. Where did that idea come from, and what can you tease about how that will play out on the show?
The fun thing with Moira is that any opportunity to sort of poke her ego is really fun to explore. So the idea that people would think she's dead, but not like enough people for her to be celebrated. It's just like an article and then some people responded to it. Was a really funny premise. Because it sort of ate away at her. She didn't know whether she should respond to it, and is it news, and then, is it theybbe I should revel in it, maybe I should take more time. So it turns out to be a very funny, I don't want to give too much away, but there's some very funny outfits. Moira's decision to reveal, I'm not going to give too much, but she plans her outfit to present herself to the media.
It may be the best one yet for her.
There's a hood, and it's all leather. So, and the wig is astounding.
Well, that was the big reveal.
I know, sorry.
So, chalk one up for you.
Last question, then we go to audience questions. Who does the best impression of Moira here on stage? Oh, listen, now we could have the audience judge, or just who do you know
I don't
already?
think I've ever done it.
Do it.
I can't. That's the best I can do.
Nobody's done it. I
No
can't.
one dares.
No one dares.
Yeah, because then you do what I just did and get lukewarm response.
I think people left.
Yeah. Half the room's empty.
People do you, just do you.
And okay,
Oh, now
so I would like to. I've done this once before, and I don't know how it went over, but I would like everyone to just give it a little shot. Just do it. Just do it, guys. It takes a load off.
they are
Let me
doing
tell
it.
you.
They are doing it.
Yeah, you look good doing it, too.
It does.
Sometimes your arms get tired.
You just gotta give them a break. You just gotta give them a break.
Little T-Rex hands.
Little T-Rex piano player
Yeah.
in an old-timey saloon.
Well, since we were just talking about fashion, I will ask this first one. It says the costume design plays such an integral part of the storytelling on the show. The black and white, when splashes of color appear in family. Whose idea was this, and what are the other things to look out for in this vein?
It was my idea. No, it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, the costume in the show is it's actually a very sort of cheap device in a way, because what we're able to do with the wardrobe is tell a backstory of these characters without having to constantly remind the audience of where they came from. So from a narrative standpoint, when you see people in these outfits, the audience is always sort of confronted with their past. They know that they're wealthy, they know that they have these clothes, and it's just exposition that we don't have to write. Because my biggest pet peeve is people explaining how they're feeling and what they're doing. So the wardrobe as a character in and of itself allows us to tell this backstory without actually physically having to tell it. And Moira, Catherine came in with a reference when we first started exploring what the aesthetic of this strange woman would be. And she brought in a picture of Daphne Guinness, who is the heir to the Guinness fortune, and she's, was a McQueen muse, and I looked at it and said, well, how do we translate this to television? And we thought, well, if we kept it in black and whites and we went just far enough, I think we can sort of rein it in, and that's where David, being his mother's son, also adopting the black and white, came to play. So that was that.
Okay. A question for Annie. Do you want Alexis to end up with Ted or Mutt?
That sucks.
Hard at all.
Well, I know the answer, but Tim's just so great too. I think at the end of the day, I would hope Alexis ends up with Ted because he's just such a fucking pudding of a man, and they've really helped each other find the best versions of themselves so far, and without changing things that they don't want to change. Ted.
This is just a question. We can go down the line. What is your funniest behind-the-scenes, on-set lol moment? What is the one that you always come back to when people ask you?
Lol means laugh out loud.
You shouldn't have told him. We should have started with Eugene and gone.
I saw his eyebrows raised, and I was like, well, catch it before it comes in.
Wow. You're putting me on, aren't you? Laugh out loud moment on the set? Well, for me, it was a scene. Well, it's with Chris Elliott because he always makes me laugh. Chris is just so much fun on the set because he just goes off on his own little tangents right up until you roll camera and the director yells action, and he will do it right up to the last second before we hear action. Then he snaps to and he goes right into his dialogue. But we were shooting a scene where he's giving me golf tips, and I just lost it. It was well. I'm giving him. He's giving me golf tips. He's standing behind me, and he's got his arms wrapped around me, and he's got his hands on my hands, giving me some tips. And I stop and I say, no, this is not going to work. I don't believe you know anything about golf. But I'm going to give you the tips. So I turn and I stand behind Chris, and we're kind of doing this thing. And listen, I'm a very professional person on set and on stage, whatever. I rarely break up. I'm kind of professional in that.
But when it's from behind.
In that sense. Anyway, here we go with how that doesn't make any sense. So I'm standing behind him and I'm saying, okay, Roland, you've got the thing now. You've got your hands on the club now. You got your knees slightly bent because that gives you the balance. That's right. That's right. And you're using the Vardon grip. And he says, yes, I'm using Vardon. And I say, okay, that's fine. Now your hands you got the interlocking grip, and your thumb is right down the shaft. And I hear Chris say, oh, you better believe it. And I lost it and could not get it back.
We got chastised. I was filming the whole thing.
Yeah, and you were filming the whole thing.
And the director, at a certain point, got serious with us.
I could not stop laughing, and then the director comes on set and goes, okay, I get it. It's really funny. But here's the thing. If we don't get this shot in now, we're going to lose the light, and we don't have a scene, okay? So let's really try and get this down. And we start it again, and I lose it again, and now and finally we got it. I don't know how, but that's my LOL.
Does anyone have something that can top that, or should we move on to the next question? That is the question.
Mine involves steak and dog's diapers, so we can just skip me.
That sounds kind of good.
I had, just quickly, Moira and David were selling beauty products And Catherine is will never break. I've never seen her come close to it. Anyway, I have a face full of cosmetic bronzer on, and a bad, like
Trumpian.
a weird conceptual shirt, and it was like the first time David ventured into like a light khaki look. And we're hawking these, pyramid scheme cosmetics to a room full of people who really couldn't care less. And we're trying so hard. And at one point,
Desperately.
I look over at Catherine, and she looks over at me, and the desperation in both of our faces, she lost it. And it's one of the crowning achievements of my life. I'd like to say it was me, but I think it was just a very orange face that I had.
This is an interesting question for Eugene and Dan. All your shots are in the summer. It makes Canada look hospitable. Will you ever shoot in the winter?
That's a very interesting question. The weather in Schitt's Creek is always gorgeous. But
There may
I'm afraid now. I'm very
there
afraid.
may be one episode in the wintertime. Maybe. I'm gonna leave it at that for now.
Another good question here, a little trivia. How much time has passed on the show from the start of the season 1 to now? We can't figure it out. The crew
What?
of ladies in the front row.
Okay, I can barely keep track of it. I don't know. 4 years. Let's go with 4 years. 3.5 years. I think it's summers. We've calculated it. There's a board with the entire thing written out. I don't have it here, unfortunately. But I think it's about 3.5 years, yeah.
And we have several questions about just working with family. We have someone here who's with her brother tonight. I think that brought the question to her mind. But what can you sort of say about just how now you're 4 seasons in the show? How has that relationship been working together?
We're still talking.
But there are 2 people seated between you.
True. By choice. No, it's good. I mean, the one thing that I've been saying is it's really a matter of, I think because we share an end goal, which is like, what is the best answer for the show? It really comes down to navigating and negotiating whose idea best serves the show, and then negotiating how you go about expressing that idea to one another.
And how do you express it?
Sometimes not well. But it's it's a lesson in patience. Do you know what I mean?
I will say one of the most adorable things I ever saw family-wise here was when I was doing a scene with Eugene, and you came and gave Eugene a note, and we did the scene, and you executed that note, and then you looked up like most actors do for approval from the person who gave the note, and Dan was texting. And it was like the saddest thing I've ever seen.
To my credit, when you get down to something like that, and there's like one small little change that you want to see, and then you see it, and you're like, perfect, done. That's what it was.
I kept looking around.
The story. It made it.
But the face was like, broke my heart.
What was that scene?
We were outside, I don't know.
yeah. That one.
This is a question from Michael, kind of speaking to notes. What were some of the hardest scenes to film because you wanted to get them perfect?
Mine? No. Because we want to get everything perfect, quite honestly. I don't think there's one scene that supersedes another. I think, there's some scenes that have some very meaty kind of emotional content, but quite honestly, I think we never leave a scene unless we.
No,
think
we're
we
very
have it.
thorough in terms of just making sure that we've got it. But yeah, I think the Moira reveal on stage with Alexis was something that we really needed to make sure was executed properly. I think the David Patrick stuff in the car was something that I wanted to make sure was real and that people watched and could relate to in some sort of way. So there's moments, I think some of the more emotional moments are the ones that you really have to keep a particular eye out for, because those are the ones that you never want to feel like, ooh, that played a bit too saccharine, or ooh, that played a bit too heavy-handed, because you are balancing comedy as well. People tune into the show to laugh. So when you're going to throw something, when you're going to throw a little bit of an emotional curveball, you really need to make sure that the storytelling is as good as it can be.
And Baby, I'm Yours. Is there a story behind why that song was chosen? Perfect.
There's a couple. All the songs that we've used have been personal sort of favorites that I've put on a big long list of things that I would love to work into the show. Baby, I'm Yours was a cover that who did it? Who was the band? Anyway,
Arctic
British. It
Monkeys?
was Arctic Monkeys. Yes, thank you. And I had it and thought, this is so great. And then I played 4 different songs for Catherine and said, I played them with Annie and Catherine. I played you those while we were watching. And she picked that one, and it was great. And there's a couple other songs. The Irma Thomas song off of the first season, When David's Driving Away, was a song that I really wanted in there. And they all tell a sort of subliminal message. And that song ended up getting us right to Irma Thomas. One of our producers called, and she picked up the phone. And we asked, can we buy your song from you? And she said yes. And then we have there's a song coming up in our 4th season that I'm not gonna spoil because it's quite good. But there's a song that is Something Happens. Musically. And it was good.
Right. We'll be talking about that next year when we're on this stage. It's very good. I'm sure this is a question that you get a lot. This is from Kristen and Josh. What are some memorable moments from the show that were improvised? So much they can't think of their answer, but it's okay.
So little.
You Get Murdered First was improvised.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd love to take credit for it, but that's an Annie Murphy special.
Thank you, Dan. I've been waiting for that for years.
That was improvised.
It's a lot of like
A
one-liners
lot of the
here and
goodbyes.
there.
Anytime someone leaves a room, it's improvised. So whether it's a look or a thing, usually we save the ins and outs of scenes to be sort of played around with.
Fighting with menus is always a fun one that I like to just work into whatever whatever scene I can with you.
Yep. Cool. Well,
And
Yeah, by and large, they don't. 99% of the show is scripted and beautifully scripted, and there's nothing more we need from scenes. And occasionally, at the end of a scene, somebody will, as Dan said, goes on, and we'll throw something in, and usually we end up keeping it because it just seems to work beautifully. Lovely little moment.
or
Oh, no, I was going to say, the first season when Catherine thinks that
her
something's
jewelry's
her
missing in the
jewelry's
pilot
been stolen.
episode.
Yes, and she's going through she's
Screaming.
rifling through drawers and opening a drawer and screaming and opening a drawer and flinging things around. And Dan and I
couldn't handle it.
walked into the room just as she was taking out a single light bulb from the drawer and looked at it and just screamed with every fiber of her being on our entrance. And we just had to be like, no.
No, and if you rewatch that scene, I think I'm doing like a... And whenever you see me do that, it happens often. It's just me being not professional.
But the thing,
she was screaming, and she had never rehearsed the scene. So we were doing this scene with walking in on her doing this, and it was all fresh. And how do you stay in character when that's happening?
But the thing of it is, she was screaming, and she didn't scream when she looked at the light bulb. That was the beautiful thing.
There's like a soft whimper.
She was screaming at everything, looking for her lost jewelry, and she would open a drawer and scream, ah! And then she would pick something up and go, ah! And then she picked up this light bulb, and she went, oh. Wow.
What a goddess.
That's a great question. People also want to know what you were watching for inspiration for writing or sort of creating the characters or performing the characters. Anything that you find that inspiration from?
Inspiration before the show or the characters specifically?
I think just in general for the characters. Is there anything I know? I think the last time you were here, Dan mentioned that he keeps a thesaurus app when you're writing Moira's voice because she never says anything like.
Because I don't have
anyone
that
else.
kind
Normal
of
human.
vocabulary, sadly.
Is there anything like that, or tools that you use whenever you're writing in the voice of the other characters, or for the actresses, just things that you have in mind, other performances maybe that you pull from, anything like that?
I watched a bunch of clips, like YouTube clips, because I couldn't bring myself to watching entire shows of, like, you know, Kardashians and that kind of thing.
But you were talking about like YouTube, like beauty bloggers and things too, which
Yeah.
I actually feel like it's more that than it is.
Yeah, but for the, like the and also what I got from them was, so when they hold their handbags, they hold their purses like over their, like this, with their broken wrist this way. So I was like,
Now it's mine.
And our last question here is from Russell. It's a question, I guess, for Dan. How do you run the writer's room as a showrunner? How do you maintain the balance between showrunner, co-creator, and performer? It's a lot to do.
Well, they happen at different times, so that's always helpful. Although this year it was not. It was at the same time. This year we were editing the. Yeah. You know, I have an idea. I have a vague idea of what I want for the next season and where I want the characters to go. It's a very thoughtful approach, I think, to we have a great room and we really try to justify the actions of every character. There shouldn't be an episode where an audience member watches it and thinks, that feels weird. Why is that character doing that? Because to me, that's a big pet peeve, and I watch it. I notice it a lot in TV. It's easier for characters to serve a story than for story to serve as characters. So for us, the story always has to service the emotional movements of the characters and not vice versa. Because when you tune into the show, I mean, like any person who watches TV, you want to feel like you're walking into a safe space, and that nothing will be sort of pulled out from under you. So it's really important for us not necessarily to base our stories around what the audience wants, but rather to continue to give the audience stories that they have learned or, you know, grown to love. So it's really just about how far you can push these people, and you know, ultimately at the end of the day, it's a story about love. It's a story about like four people who have never really understood what it means to love without money. And so when that's your driving force, season after season, you get to just continue to pull the layers back and expose these people to what it means to truly care without any kind of peripheral or superficial sort of facilitators.
I think season 4 really does pull back some layers. The first 6 episodes are wonderful. You're going to love them. So I just want to thank you all for coming tonight.
Thanks for coming, everybody.